everyone, this is Tony from Firearms Cafe. I'm out here in the Sonoran Desert just north of Phoenix. Out here with a buddy of mine, Jack from Two Brothers Adventures. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to try and set up the Versa shelter. This was done by a gentleman by the name of Dave Canterbury, and I think he's over at Pathfinders Wilderness. You can see him also on YouTube if you just do a search for him. He's the guy that originated this. What I did is I wanted to see if I could do it. I made my own. Jack and I had actually gone up into the mountains out in Prescott, and we had set it up, and one of the problems we found with it while it set up and did what it was supposed to do is up there most of the land is sloped pretty bad, so it makes it a little bit more difficult. So what I wanted to do was to kind of bring it out here, bring it to a place where there's no real tall trees, to where you would just be in the desert and set it up and see how it does. Alright, as you can see, I got a little bit of it set up. A couple of the problems I ran into with it, we'll go over those first and then I'll tell you what I like about it. A couple of the problems are the ground out here is so sandy and soft that the actual stakes that you're using to drive your guy wires with, they have a tendency to want to pull right out. So I think what I'm going to have to do is probably weigh them down with rocks. Out here in this type of environment, you may be even better to go ahead and maybe even tie them to the rocks or something. I don't know. Probably, like I said, what I'll end up doing is just going ahead and putting some big rocks on top of the stake. I believe if there was a big wind that came, it would probably go ahead and rip the guy wires and the stakes right out of the ground. So that's kind of what about the only problems I've had. The tarp that I'm using too is a little bit bigger than what he was using. I think I have like an 8x10 tarp, which is actually pretty big. I believe Dave uses maybe a 7x7 or a 6x7 tarp. It does give you good shade when there's a little bit of a breeze coming through. It's actually nice and cool. So this would be a very effective tarp, especially out here in the desert. So the setup of this actually only took about probably 15 minutes or so. If I had to do it again, I think I could cut that time probably to where I'm setting it up in maybe 5-6 minutes at the most once I get it figured out a little bit better. But I do think it's a very effective shelter. Like I said, I've got my wool blanket down. I've also got a poncho liner, which I like having. That makes it keeps some of the grass and stuff off of the blanket. But it's actually very comfortable. I can go ahead and stretch out and lay down here, and I've got plenty of room. I've got plenty of shade as the sun goes through the day. I could be in shade pretty much during the hottest part of the day. Even if the shadow or the shade moves up kind of beyond where I am, it's not a big deal to just go ahead and move this over and up a little bit, and I'll be in the shade all day. I think what I may try and do next is do maybe a couple of different configurations and see if I can do maybe more of a tent type thing. Also, I'm going to try those rocks on there too. Well, as you can see, Jack and I, my buddy of mine from Two Brothers Adventures, we tried another little bit of a setup, more of an experiment than anything else. I think probably the most effective way is the first way that we did it, what you saw earlier, where we went on the first grommets. I only have 4 stakes, and what I probably need is 5, maybe even 8. They take up very little room, they don't really weigh anything. But just by having those, it would give me a lot more anchor points, and I think that's what I need. Again, what we find is that the ground, it just doesn't want to bite on those stakes at all. We also tried to make some stakes out of some green wood, but unfortunately when you went to pound them into the ground or put them into the ground, they just kind of disintegrate. So because the soil is so different here than places like Ohio or Oklahoma, you've got a little bit more challenges. So what we did to solve that was we drove in the stakes as good as we could, and then we got some rocks and put them down to help hold them down. So I think even if a wind did blow up, it would be relatively sturdy. This little stick here is just to give me some headroom. Again, in an ideal situation, if you had some trees, you would and you wanted to set it up this way, you would probably go ahead and try and use these your front grommets and tie it onto a tree so that it would actually sit up and give you some shade. But it's probably a good 90 degrees or so out here, and underneath here, underneath the tarp, it's relatively comfortable. You can feel the heat coming a little bit because the underside of this is brown. If your main purpose was to keep the heat off of you during the day, what you would probably want to do would be to reverse this so that the reflective or the silver side was on the outside, and it would knock some of the heat away from you. But like I said, it's just something for fun. I would say get out there, try it, do it yourself, try and make this. I think the total cost that I have in this thing is less than maybe $50, maybe 55, 60 bucks at the most. Most of this stuff you can buy secondhand and used. Tarps are cheap, paracord is cheap, the poles are cheap, everything is pretty cheap. So again, this here is just showing that where I needed to put the rocks down. I'll come over here and show you sort of some of this stuff here, and again over here, again because the soil is just so poor. But underneath I have my poncho liner and a nice wool blanket, and it's actually pretty comfortable under there. So here's the back side of the tent, and like I said, if your main focus was to keep the heat off of you during the day, especially out here in Arizona, you may want to have the reflective side or the silver side on the outside so that would bounce some of the heat up. What you're getting now with the dark side is it's actually absorbing some of the heat, so that if you get up close to the underside of the tarp, you can feel a little bit of that heat coming through. Get out there, have some fun, and remember to, when you vote, always vote for people that will uphold our rights and uphold our freedoms. If you'd like to hear some more things about Second Amendment issues, you can always go over to my website, which is firearmscafe.com, or you can go over to Gun Rights Radio, which is a network that I belong to, and there's several other podcasts over there as well. Well, take her easy, and we'll see you next time.